I'm going to take a stab at this while my mind is still sharp. My focus med should still be kicked in. So there was this video by Thoughtful Faith. I will be tagging them in the description. I hope you're watching this, Jacob. I do appreciate your efforts on this front, but both when you addressed Cosmic Skeptic and when you talked with this creedal brother in Christ, when you spoke with this creedal brother in Christ, it didn't really land and address the gratuity of animal suffering. Now you guys got closer. Together you guys got closer this time than ever you have. By the way, hence the title of the video, which I aim to have be the atheists are right about gratuitous animal suffering. Well, are right about animal suffering, but but not the way that they think they are. Some variant of that. I'll have to still determine the title. They're right, but not the way they think. So, your guest said the intrinsic goodness of life is better than the intrinsic badness of suffering. But you guys don't justify why. I'm going to be setting that forth later. See, you can only really be just like, sure, you can lay out that there's going to be even more goodness later, but someone could just say, well, they don't believe in that goodness later. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of a lazy argument because this is about God, and if you are rejecting the idea of God because you don't believe in the goodness later, then that's not very strong. But there is a badness before that surpasses. A suffering that makes the gratuity of animal suffering look tame. And a suffering which in the Latter-day Saint model, or at least as I personally understand Latter-day Saint doctrine, it is not God's fault, and He is trying to do away with it, but it does exist, and it is not at all desirable. So, now, of course, Creedal Christian would immediately be protesting, how can something exist which is not God's fault? It gets back to the nature of God, the Aristotelian issue. So anyway, I have these outlined in points after going through what you guys said, and I have not strung it together very well in which order I'm going to address them. So that one that I just read was point I. The last one, we're going to circle back to H after going through A through G, and H will include that really bad thing. So firstly, you guys spoke of I really need to have the name of your guest, because it's going to be rude of me to not really address him by name. Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy. And he did do a really good job. He did an excellent job. And you did as well. But again, you did not cut to the very... You cut really close. So, a being of fundamental volition. You and Michael Jones agreed that that's necessary for the universe or anything to exist. And you guys spoke of materialism versus idealism. Later, Michael Jones was talking about some dualism and there being an issue with that, and you disagreed with him. And the issue of all that stuff. You know, things made of either all matter or all mind, all matter with materialism, all mind with idealism, which I don't know how that differs from panpsychism. I forgot to look it up before I did this. And I also still need to... it's probably going to be a real deep dive. There's something in Doctrine and Covenants that I bear looking up. I'll mention it later. Anyway, in Part B, there's a mention of spirit matter not being physical matter. And yeah, I do. I'm one of those Latter-day Saints that disagrees with you, Jacob, about, or at least I think, I can't remember which way you sided on it, but I disagree with the idea that spirit matter is not physical matter. I believe the scriptures are pretty clear on this. It's a finer sort of matter. It's like, it's more akin to light. The way I would describe it is that it would be like if you were to pull an operating system out of a computer and hold it up as a physical thing that is still functioning. That's what a spirit body is. It expands the mind aspect of an intelligence. Now, some people hearing this may wonder what the heck an intelligence is, and that's in point C. There's intelligences are something in Latter-day Saint teaching, which you may, I seem to recall you addressing that in that video. Jacob, thank you. Doctrine and Covenants, section 88 and 93 both refer to it, if I'm not mistaken. One of them says, intelligence or the light of truth was not made nor created, nor indeed can be. Interestingly, this means that we, as Latter-day Saints, if we believe the Doctrine and Covenants to be the Word of God, if we really hold to that, we believe that artificial intelligence will never be able to create beings that truly have volition. No amount of matter stacking will make that happen. So we fundamentally, on a doctrinal level, believe that it's just not possible to make beings with volition. But this also means that we posit there's something that exists that God doesn't create, that God can't create. Now, some may argue that this disempowers God, but if it is a thing that nothing and no one of any kind can create, and it just is, it's very different from saying that it is the thing that can be done, and saying that God doesn't have the power to do it. It's not a thing that can be done. It just isn't. It just can't be done. It's one thing that's impossible to do. And I believe that in this fundamental, these minds, that as Michael Jones might word it and term it, these minds are intelligences. Orson Scott Card called them IUAs in some of his books. Then there's also the physical matter, or which is referred to as elements. There's also sometimes an issue of it being truth. I feel like it's kind of iffy for me to equate element to truth, and I think that truth is more of a system, a kingdom, and it just superimposes over the elements. But there is a certain extent to which that in itself organizes and creates larger matter. So they are somewhat equivalent. There may not be actual fundamental elements, elemental matter that isn't that doesn't have truth to it, but it still is matter. It may be that it's all just shaped light. There's no real significant matter out there where there's no order. But there's just this concept of there being the things that things to act, which is the intelligences, and things to be acted upon, which is the matter. You have to have both, or there is no existence. And so that's an important thing. I'm going to skip around here. So that gets to an interesting thing, but with the existence. So the being of volition. So that is its own sort of dimension of reality. Now, Albert Einstein spoke of a fifth dimension. At the time, they had established 4 dimensions. The 3 spatial, length, width, height, and then the temporal, the time one, of change. We talked all about change, time being relative, and change is relative, and there's all these theories of relativity. But Einstein insisted there was another dimension above, and I'm kind of shocked and disappointed he didn't get to what it is, because it's actually pretty simple. Because the only... Now, sorry, it's pretty... So, pardon my dyspraxia. In string theory, they tried to say that it's rotational dimensions, but that's just spicy spatial. And you're just adding aspects to spatial. The whole tesseract thing, that's just adding more spatial. Let's just stick with the 3 spatial dimensions. So in order to tack on more, you would have to either work with time and change, or add on some other exotic thing that we can't fathom. So time and change it is, because the volition is necessary. Well, what is that? Well, it is a change in change. Just as length by width makes area, change in change makes choices. Choice, options. Freedom, or whichever ways you want to talk about it. But there's this aspect of there's different paths down which time will go, different changes, and these entities of volition choose one. They choose which way they go. And what they do, we choose. We have volition. We all experience it on a fundamental level. We see different things before us. Sometimes we experience indecision. We don't know what thing we're going to do, because we could do any of the options before us. And if they all appeal to us equally, we're at a loss. So, that's the 5th dimension. It's choice. And only in that dimension can you have the being of a fundamental volition that can be a creator. And that's why we don't live in the 4th dimension. That's why I feel like that's why Einstein kept insisting on the 5th. Interestingly, there's some other stuff to get into that I've heard about him plagiarizing and stuff from his wife. I don't know how accurate that is. Just know that if someone watching this is aware of that, know that I'm aware of it, but I have not dove deep into it, so I don't really know how verifiable that is. Pardon me for spreading a rumor, but I don't want to pretend to be ignorant of it. So, anyway, so then we get to this idea, the being of fundamental volition, that God, right? And part of the issue with conversation is with defining God in Aristotelian terms. And yes, the creedal God is defined in Aristotelian terms. Whether or not that's actually from the Greeks or the Bible, that fine. We aren't discussing whether the Trinity is true, and because I'm already operating on the assumption that it isn't, because this is Latter-day Saint doctrine. Okay, if that bothers you too much as a Trinitarian, this video isn't for you anyway. It's for atheists. If you want to keep watching to try to debunk it, it's fine. But I'm trying to lead atheists to Christ through this path, and if this is the only way they can get to belief in Christ, hopefully that's helpful. Although, admittedly, some folks would think that that's still going to hell, even though they obey it. that's getting into a whole issue of what defines Christianity. But I would hope that you would follow Christ's exhorting regarding those who don't walk after your way, but still do good. The idea is to get these atheists with good hearts to adhere more closely to Christianity, to confessing Christ, especially these ones who, as Jacob Hansen spoke of, they're atheists who believe strongly in that point of a God, of a being of volition, but they reject the supposition of God because of the problem of evil and suffering, which is fair for them, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so instead of defining ADHD, oh my goodness, instead of defining God by the Aristotelian terms, let's look instead at what a pagan lowercase g God is. Now, why would I address that if I'm talking about things from Christian terms? Some may say, Mormon's a pagan. No. In the Old Testament, there's a lot of use of that term. You can call it henotheism, polytheism, whatever, but when they're addressing idolatry, there's this idea of these gods, lowercase gods, and it was operating on some kind of definition of what those are. What is that definition? Well, it's some sort of being with some sort of authority over some sort of domain to set rules and determine how things operate within that domain. I didn't look that up. That's just me trying to break it down. Hopefully that works and is an accurate definition. Correct me in the comments if you want, but I'm going to run with that. So the idea is, do I have the thing going off? Sorry, I've been doing Minecraft in the background here because it's just passively farming stuff anyway. So now that we've defined what gods are, now how does that fit into the idea of these beings of volition, right? Why is that important? It's because in this fifth dimension of reality, there's do I skip to it or no? I'll skip over the video game thing and get to it when I'm tying in the problem of evil. So there is this space outside of God's universe, outside of where he has bounded the authority, because there are minds, intelligences out there that have not entered into his plan, are not obeying him. Whether that's because they've rejected him or they've never known him, whatever. They are not compliant with his authority, so they must be kept out. Kind of like walls for countries. He has to have a boundary for his kingdom. And then outside of that, in the wilderness of existence, these intelligences, they just exist. They just are, like points on a Cartesian plane. Maybe like a complex plane. I don't know how you would factor in change and make it different. But, ooh. Oh, an Enderman. I accidentally looked at an Enderman. Hello, sucker. Goodness. Be careful where I put my eyes next time. Game trying to kill me. Now I can't accidentally cross eyes with an Enderman. So out in that space, there's these intelligences, like I was saying. All they can do, because they have no law, there is no kingdom. All they can do is receive light, emit light, and move. And the determining of their movement, like which way, how far, whatever, it's all relative to what light they're absorbing, because there is no absolute sense of direction It's all relative. It's all based on this light. And so, when it says in Doctrine and Covenants that light cleaveth unto light, and intelligence seeks light and truth, and it cleaves unto the same. That's what that is. And so, in this space where these naked intelligences only have those powers, they don't even have touch. They don't have feeling. They don't have words. They don't have names. They have no certainty of anything because there are no laws. So they don't even know if they send light back to a source, that light will come back from it again, because there's other entities like them everywhere. Now, what their capacity to think is, I don't know. I don't know if that varies. Frankly, it probably does. But the concept is that God shines forth into this darkness. Most of it comprehends him not. But the good ones come to him, and they join him. They become a part of his kingdom, and they receive his law, which is empowering and enabling. Why does this matter so much? Because imagine yourself being in that position, being one of these specks, because in my understanding of the gospel, all of us were, including the animals, including the protists and bacteria, everything that ever lived, the plants too, even planets, because the scriptures talk about them having souls, having spirits. All of it, before this universe was, just out there, without any certainty, no empowerment. And this gets back to the video game thing I skipped over, but it sucks. It's like playing a game where your controller's broken, except it's worse. There is no basis for any of it. Like and you can't go play another game. You can't stop playing the game. No, that is your existence. A game where all you can do is receive light, emit light, and move. It's a pretty lame game. It sucks. And imagine efforts to create, to build something, somehow, and it all going to naught, just falling apart. Because as John chapter 1 says, there was no existence without Christ, without the Word. Other universes can other gatherings of intelligences can attempt to make a universe, but without an atoning Savior to draw the balance between justice and mercy, there's no basis for the authority of whatever God is over their organization, because there'd be some intelligence that takes the role of a lowercase god. Sorry, I'm trying to string it together. And so, I have to make sure I'm only poisoned. Okay. So, and the reason why that, so these gods, they can only really be a god, and that functions, that make a universe that works, if they have that balance between justice and mercy. Now, justice is that law granting. It's like the code of a game, right? And mercy would be the hope, where even though there's mistakes, you can still make do. Imagine if you tried to play Dark Souls and there was no revive. You just suck. You just lose and you're done. You can't even play again. There's no save. None of that. You get to try once. And you lose. Why even bother? It's too hard. You lose. And if any game that has in-game death, if there was no try again or extra lives, why bother? It's done. That's all. And so that's where the mercy comes in and is important. But again, if there's no certainty in a game, or even challenge or consequence, like if you do things and no matter what you do, you still win the same way, if you just play it out. Oh, it's the same ending. No matter what I did, I just, the time's up and I'm at the end, and I win, and this is what it looks like. It's not really that fun a game. It's just a way to waste time. If there's no consequence for your different actions, then did they really matter? Sorry for rambling. This does all tie together. We'll pull this all back in. Of course, Christ is the bridge between justice and mercy, because mercy can't rob justice, and you need a substitutionary person. Of course, it has to be another entity that isn't the one who establishes the law, because if it's the same entity, if somebody owes me money and I use a sock puppet and say, oh, here, the sock puppet is going to buy your debt from me, and you will pay the sock puppet now. You say, that's just stupid. It's just extra steps. It's not, like, it's still you. It's you. It's not real mediation. And if the person who owes me money puts on a sock puppet and that buys their debt and says, okay, now you like, whichever way it is, like, no, that's not very comparable, because that's not the Trinity isn't a part of us. But anyway, it has to be, and of course it still has its own problems, but it's completely different and irrelevant to the Trinity. But so the one who is owed money has to be different from the one who mediates on that debt. Of course, the Father commends all judgment into the hands of the Son, but that's by commendation. The Father had to establish things to start with. Now that's out of the way. We still need to get to animal suffering, I promise. We're getting that. So, the animals have spirits too. They were intelligences too. They were in that sucky, horrible game too. This life, and that which is for them law of the jungle, dog eat dog, survival of the fittest. It's kind of rough, but there's a lot of fun games that work pretty much on the same principles. And it's somewhat enjoyable. Now, if that's all that they had, and this was their only life, it's not fair enough. It's not good enough. Especially with some animals being deprived of the natural order, living in food factories, never wandering or foraging, or even reproducing in some instances, barely living at all. As some may say, it's just, how could God do that? Well, part of that is chalked up to how in games where it's a battle royale, some bad stuff happened. Even if it was a battle royale, just a sandbox game with 100 players instead of a battle royale with 100 players. They could all do stuff, but that stuff can involve getting rid of each other. Taking away that capacity, it's kind of silly and lame in some aspects. In fact, sometimes in Minecraft, in a sandbox game, you get stuck in the same space as somebody, and you can't even mine out. If you're down in a hole with somebody, and if PvP is turned off, You're both stuck in there unless someone else comes and rescues you too. It's pretty sad. There's a need for the full range of options. And doing good instead of bad, because bad is an option. And in the case of with the animals and all that, there's a whole death in the world thing, and we had to have death in the world, and there's other things that gets into the whole need for the overarching plan. I guess what I could say is, as long as there's death, then as long as you have a plan that allows for death, then there's going to have to be gratuitous animal suffering that is gratuitous in terms of a bigger plan. But even that is not as bad as no existence at all, no suffering at all. At least they have pain. Like Thanos said to that one character from Avengers Assemble. He says, and if you fail, you will wish and beg for something as sweet as pain. No, I shouldn't whisper. He says, you will wish for something as sweet as pain. Basically, he's promising him oblivion, which would really suck. It's just really bad. You like to pretend that some atheists like to pretend that the horrible the proof of there being nothing after death is that if you think about it, it's too horrible to even bear. I posit that is because we remember deep down, in spite of the veil of forgetfulness, deep down in our heart of hearts, we remember what oblivion is. And it's worse than not existing. It is horrible. That's what you get a taste of when you try to imagine oblivion. So, my point is, in conclusion, yes, animal suffering is gratuitous if there is no pre-existence, and if there is no resurrection of animals, because that's a thing too. No better life after this for them as well. But we have those. God didn't make evil, it's always existed. God didn't make suffering, it's always existed. He introduced a law that put boundaries on that suffering. He said it's because of this, that, or the other, or even someone else's choices. But it's still happening for reasons. And then, after this life, God will take away the suffering. And He can affect our minds in such a way as to take it away as if it was never there, in terms of feeling it. All that we have left is what we've learned from it. So yeah, Alex O'Connor, you have a point. The deer trapped under a log. It's really horrible. But that deer trapped under a log, if it could choose between being trapped under a log and slowly dying without even being preyed upon, if it could choose between that and never having existed at all in a stable reality, just moving around in chaos soup, getting and giving light, hoping for something certain. I'm pretty sure the deer would take being trapped under a log. Gratuitous animal suffering is still way better than Leviathan, than the oblivion, the blind eternities. So, there it is. It's the point that I've been hoping you would hit upon, Jacob Hansen, but, it doesn't help that our church doesn't talk much about the pre-existence before the council in heaven. It just doesn't. But, yeah, that's the end, that's the answer. I'll try to clip it to and make it short. But it's better. Just like with playing a game. If you have to choose between a really, really painful, difficult game, like Dark Souls, or being totally ruffle-stomped in a battle royale, if you have to choose between that and like literal slave labor or something, like not just other real life things. Like if you have to choose between that, I guess should say a game in which your choices really don't matter, but you still have to play the game. If you have to choose between those two things, like a low resolution, low interaction game where you can kind of build stuff, but it always fails. It doesn't really amount to much, and you're stuck playing it. That and a tough battle royale or Dark Souls, something like. Any game's better than that, really. Sure, it could be interesting, but if you can't even leave, gratuitous animal suffering is better than the void. Welcome. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Sorry I didn't have many talking points. I guess many PowerPoints or anything like that. But I do want to get to a justification. I'm sorry I skipped this step, but a justification of an atheist's insistence that God be good. Because in the Bible, it says that he's good. In Psalm 30:19, "Oh, how abundant is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, and worked for those who take refuge in you, in the sight of the children of mankind." Or Psalm 107:8-9, "Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works." This is my sleep aid. "For his wondrous works to the children of mankind. For he satisfies the thirsty, and the hungry he fills with good things." James 1:17, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." This is the divine origin of all good things. So the bodies of these animals. In Matthew 19:17, "And he said to him, Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments." In this passage, Jesus acknowledges God is the sole source of ultimate goodness. This was for the AI Google result on scriptures that state that God must be good. And Mark 10:18, "And Jesus said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." This verse, similar to Matthew 19:17, emphasizes the unique and inherent goodness of God. It is very reasonable for atheists to expect God to be omnibenevolent. It is very reasonable. And it is very reasonable for them to object to gratuitous animal suffering. But again, the suffering of minds, of naked minds in the blind eternities, swimming about in chaos with no real control over their existence, is many magnitudes greater than any gratuitous animal suffering, because there's no stopping it, except with the light from God, the law from God. thank you. If you liked this video, go ahead and like it. Please share it with someone who can make sense of it, and maybe send an editor my way, I don't know. It's a real mess. If you want to see more stuff from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It'll show up in your subscription feed, if not in your recommendations. I probably don't belong in people's recommendations. Subscription feeds are useful. Thank you for listening, if you've been through this. And have yourselves a good day. God bless you.